Okay, in this lesson we are going to animate a pre-made ball object and have it bouncing across the screen. I'm going to ask you to bear with me because I'm recording this with a cough drop in my mouth. I'm going to try really hard not to cough while we're doing this, but I want to make sure that you can see some of these directions illustrated because some of them are just a little bit not clear from the printed directions. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is we are going to set our frames per second for this job. And to do that, we're going to go up to Window. Oops, first we're going to click on Maya. There we go. Window, and then Settings Preference, and then we're going over to Preferences. Sounds kind of redundant. And then again to Settings. Okay, once you get in there, you want to make sure that this time here is set to NTSC 30 frames per second. Mine already is. If yours isn't, you go ahead and change it in the drop down box and then hit save. Okay, if you haven't already opened up this scene, you would have copied it into your Getting Started folder and then gone ahead and opened up the Bouncing Ball Start file. Okay. The first time we did this project with my other class, we did not exactly follow the directions and we started out by selecting the ball. But what you want to do first is actually select the arrow around the ball. And that's the thing that we're going to be making these changes to. Okay. First thing you're going to do is go down here to your timeline. If you click right here, this is frame 1. And on frame 1, we are going to move our ball up about 15 units. Okay? And you can do this several ways. First, you can just kind of drag it up, okay, using your move tool. And as you can see over there in the channel box, the translate Y values are changing. Now, I always tend to get off somehow, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just type in the value since we know what it's going to be. And as you can see, the ball disappeared off the screen. And if we zoom up, we can see that it's now 15 units above the origin. Okay. Okay, once we've got this selected where we want it, now this is the thing that's kind of weird. You see it's 15 over here in the translate Y value, and this is our object. This arrow around here is called ball con. Once you've got that selected, you're going to just key that value. And the shortcut for this is you've got to go over here on the words that actually say translate Y, and you're going to right click those and then hit key selected. Now, if you don't do it this way, you end up keying other things that you don't want keyed yet. So when you do it just on the words, it only keys the value for the translate Y into this keyframe. Okay, and that means that later you can go back and make changes to the other parts of the object without affecting what we've just done. Okay. Okay, the next thing we are going to do is we are going to go over to frame 10. So you click 10 on your timeline down here. And we are going to move our ball back down to the origin. So once again, you can either drag it, or I think it's just easier if you know the values, which we do for this, to go ahead and key them in. Okay, so now it's back down to 0. If you zoom, you'll see that our ball is back down here. And again, you're going to right click on the word translate Y and hit key selected. Okay. Now, on page 5 of your directions, there are several settings that you're going to put in. It will tell you on each frame which frame you're going to select down here in your timeline and what the Y value in translate Y is going to be. I'm not going to record all that, but I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, put those inputs in, and then we'll pick up from there. Okay, at this point you should have already set the keyframes for all the Y values according to the directions on page 5. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is kind of check our work. And we're going to do that by what they call play blasting the scene. One way you can do this is to go down to our timeline, right click, pick play blast from the menu. And that's going to generate a little movie that shows the animation of our object. There's a couple other ways you can check your motion of what you're doing. One is you go over here and just hit this play button, just kind of like a VCR or a DVD. It will show you a quick view. And it continues to go until you pause it. Okay? It will only show you what's in the viewport, whereas the Play Blast will show you the entire scene. Another thing you can do is what's called scrubbing the timeline, which means you're just dragging your cursor along the bottom of the timeline, and you can go as fast or slow as you want doing that. So for now, let's go back and click on frame 1. I want to show you one other little thing that might help you in checking your work. Is in our Adobe Acrobat directions, there are these little icons that look like little movie clapboards. Okay, if you can, let me close this and I'll show you what it does. Okay, if you hover over this, it will launch a little video also. It'll show you so you can check your work. If this doesn't work for you, let me know, and I do have these little videos as separate files that I can send to you. Alright, but back to our Maya scene. We are going to work with what's called the graph editor, and to get to that we are going to pick Window, Animation Editors, and Graph Editor. And then we are going to, if you need to, pick View, Frame All, and highlight Translate Y. Now when you do this, you're probably going to have more curves. My settings on this computer are obviously not the default, and I have some really funky looking rectangle curves. But when we make changes to them, they're going to end up the way they're supposed to be. If you go through the directions, 7 and 8 will give you a description of how they think you need to change this. Now to me, being new to animation last year, this was very confusing to me. I think the more you work with these objects, the more you get a feel for what works and what doesn't. But if it doesn't make sense to you, if you just follow the directions, it'll come out okay. And if it does make sense to you, great. Maybe you can help some of the rest of us. Okay. First thing we're going to do is we are going to edit the top part of these curves. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to draw a box around all the top dots, kind of like what we did with that temple roof. Okay, once you select those, you are going to use this little icon here to what they call flatten these curves. You can see it changed them. And then you're going to select the bottom ones. You have to be real careful that you don't accidentally select one of the top ones too, especially right here where they're close together. Okay. And then you're going to set that to linear tangents. And now we have kind of a nice looking curve. Okay, skipping on to a couple more pages. I'm on page 12 of the directions. We're going to make sure that we have our object selected, which we do. Okay, and they're going to suggest that we move some of these little key tangents over. The first one they want to do is move what's on 36 to 34. So you're going to select the little dot. And one important thing, if you can't move this, you need to kind of move the graph editor over, pick your move tool, and then using the middle mouse button and holding down the shift key, you're going to end up moving this dot over. There we go, to about what 34 is. Now you may actually see 34 delineated on yours. I'm just kind of guessing because the way this one's displayed, it doesn't have every single mark. And then we're going to move 40 over to 36 the same way. So select the dot, hold down the middle mouse button, shift, and we'll move that one over to 40. Okay. Then, if you want, you can play blast again. It looks like we got to move this to see it. Let's do it. Okay, and it's changed slightly. Okay, now we are going to do some more changes on these. We are going to select all the keys in the graph editor. So we're going to draw a box around all of them. And we are going to use two different icons here. This is the first one, and this is the second one. Okay, this is going to make it so that we can make some changes to the specific areas of these curves down here. Now what we're going to do is we are going to, according to the directions on page 13, we are going to kind of tighten up these curves. And what you have to do is you can barely see this light blue one here, but when you select it, it's going to turn a different color. There we go. You kind of have to be clicking around this. You might need to zoom up on this if you can't select these real carefully. And what we're going to do is when you select like the left side of these little V objects here, you're then going to use your middle mouse button and you're going to kind of move them closer to each other. And you go over and select the one on the, you have to select the point first, and select the one on the right, and you just kind of move it closer too. You're trying to make them almost vertical here. Now, if your curve up here starts getting weird shapes in it, you might not want to make it quite as straight as this. So we're going to go ahead and do each one of those. Like I said, some of this takes a little finagling. If you have a big screen and you can zoom up, that helps a little bit. And you got to make sure you just have that one point and just have this one handle, and then you can move it. So this one I'm going to have to zoom up on a little bit so I can actually see the little handle. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause the video real quick right here. We can play blast our scene and check it, and then I will pick up with the video on page 15. Okay, I closed my graph editor. We're at the top of page 15. We want to make sure we select our arrow, which is the object ball_pond. Go to frame 1 on the time slider. And now we're going to make settings that are going to make our ball bounce across the screen from left to right and not just up and down. So first thing we're going to do is over in the Translate Z box, we are going to leave it at 0, but we're going to right click and hit Key Selected. Then we're going to go to frame 50 and we are going to set it at -30 and we are going to Key Select it. Now let's play blast it and see if it's bouncing like it's supposed to. Yes! Alright, good deal. Now, we're going to go back to frame 1 right here, and we're going to go back and take a look at our graph editor again. So Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. Okay, I'm going to make it big enough that we can see it. And then you can do a View Frame All over here to get all of your object in your view space. And this time we are going to select the Translate Z settings. And you should have a line going from top left to bottom right like this. We're going to select the little key or the dot at the end of the line. And we are going to hit this icon to flatten that curve. And see how it kind of dips down like that? And here it tells you to play blast your scene. I'm not going to do that in the video. Okay. Now what we're going to do next is we are going to set some rotation for our object so that not only is our ball bouncing up and down from left to right, but it's also turning as it bounces. Okay, so we're going to go back to, I'm just going to minimize this real quick. We're going to go back to our drawing. On frame 1, we are going to set a key on that. We have a rotate ball channel set up for us. We are just going to key that, and then we're going to go to frame 50, and we're going to make a setting of -400, and we're going to right key select that. Now if we go back to our graph editor, which I minimized, you'll see that we now also have a rotate ball channel over here to pick from. So we're going to pick that. And basically from a lot of trial and error, it's going to have you make some changes to that. And what it's going to do is, and I don't know exactly where they get this number, like I said, this is one of the things that you get with experience, and I'm not quite there yet, but basically what we're going to do is instead of negative 400, we're going to change this to be negative 1740. Okay, and key select again, go back to the graph editor, and you will see that it is changed even further as far as the way this looks. Okay, now I'm going to pause right here, and then we're going to take up again on page 18, and we will have closed the graph editor by then. Okay, we're back and we're ready for page 18. And here we're going to do some further changes to our ball object. One of the reasons I had you watch the little video in the beginning with all the bouncing balls is I wanted you to think about how physics affects the balls when they go up and down. Most balls are going to have some rubbery texture to them, so when they hit the ground, they're actually going to deform somewhat. And that deformation is called squash and stretch. So now we are going to, in addition to having our ball go up and down and then having it go across from left to right and rotating as it goes, it's also going to be deformed as it hits the surface, and then it's going to deform as it goes back up. So we're going to have some settings that change that. Now there's been a channel created for us called Squash Stretch. So we go back to frame 1, and we are going to just key what's already in there in the Squash Stretch channel. And then there are some directions in here that tell you exactly which frame you're going to make changes to. Now, originally in the directions, they did not tell us what to make these changes to, and it was a little confusing. But I've got worked out some values that will work in this. If you want to experiment with it and use slightly different values, that's fine. But the ones I've got in here will probably work for you. On frame 10, we are going to set our squash stretch to 0.8. And then you always right key selected. And then on 22, we're going to set it to 0.9. Okay, and you go on. I'm not going to put every single one of these in the video, but if you look at the directions on 18 with the little notes that I've made, it'll show you what frame and what setting. Okay, and then also there are other ones at the bottom of that page. So there's kind of putting in your initial values and then kind of fine-tuning it. So I'm going to let you go ahead and put those in yourself. Once you get that done, when you go through the directions, I want you to read through some of the different settings and some of the reasons for why they make the adjustments, and then we're going to take up again in the video on page 21. Thank you. Okay, now in addition to all of our squashing and stretching and deforming and unforming, we're also going to look at the angle of movement of the ball as it hits, and on page 21 we're going to actually have the ball tilting certain ways, so we have some tilt settings also. So you're going to go to frame 1, make sure we have our little arrow object selected, and on frame 1 you're just going to go ahead and set a key on what the default is, the 0. And then the next one you're going to go down to frame 9, and you're going to set it at 10.5. And so on, according to the directions that I have in the box for you, or you can experiment with your own settings to make it look a little bit more realistic. I encourage you to actually go out and bounce a ball and look at it, look at the movement of it, or maybe take a little video with your camera and use that for reference. And if you get done with this assignment early this week, look at tweaking some of these settings so that your animation more closely matches that of what you see in real life. So if you have any questions or you need any of the videos sent to you, let me know, and I'll see you next week. Okay, I'm going to add one more thing that might help you in troubleshooting your ball animation. We talked about doing the play blast by clicking on the time slider down here, but also showed you this over here. One way you can troubleshoot is to kind of slow down the playback. So if you go down here to this little icon bring up this menu and you change your playback speed to half speed and then save it, and then like zoom way out on your scene so you can see the whole area, and you hit play, it will go rather slowly. And that'll kind of help you with the squash and stretch and the tilt and all that. It's a little bit easier to see what changes you need to make and how they affect your scene. Okay, thanks.